Good afternoon. My name is Vanessa Lieberman, and I am one of the safety coordinators in the FST department, and welcome to today's training, Performing Essential or Critical Research During COVID-19 Pandemic. If you have a question about the immediate slide, please type it into the chat and the moderator will slot me to answer questions. Otherwise, please hold all questions to the end and then type your questions into the chat to be answered. Please keep your audio on mute. This session is being recorded for later distribution. This plan was developed by the RMI Safety Committee, which includes myself, Ben Monpetit, Lucy Joseph, and department chairs Linda Harris and Dave Block. We developed this in accordance with the state and university guidance and also in collaboration with other departments on campus. As things are constantly changing, this plan in its current state might change as well. We will notify everyone should that occur, but we ask for you to please remain flexible and thank you for your patience. What is critical or essential research? It is research that is necessary to ensure the ongoing viability of research, including the well-being of research animals, essential plant populations, as well as maintenance of research material that are perishable or not easily replaced. It is also tasks required for the maintenance of equipment that, if not done, could result in damage, experiments that have a small window for completion, and clinical research where the health and safety of human research participants could be impacted should research activities cease. PIs interested in performing research during Phase 1X must review the Office of Research Guidelines for UC Davis Research Ramp Up, Ramp Down, and receive approval from the department chair. In order to receive approval from the department chair, the PI must send a request letter with the following information: the PI's name, the department, school, college, and contact information, project title, justification that the project meets the categorization for Phase 2. Phase 1X uses Phase 2 categorization for approval. The lab address, a plan outlining the approach used for maintaining low density of personnel on site, and a statement agreeing to adopt the facility SOP, use proper PPE as needed, and adhere to the constraints specified in the addendum and the previous guidance. In order to obtain approval, the PI must also create an electronic system of communication and scheduling, complete the Working During COVID-19 SOP, and obtain all COVID and research-related PPE. If PPE cannot be obtained, work cannot begin. PIs should begin forming their approval requests while simultaneously completing required documentation and training. So we've been getting a lot of questions about the Working During COVID-19 Pandemic SOP. What we would like to see in the detailed procedure is a plan on how you will change your lab techniques based on this training and provided guidance documents. These plans should include how you will adjust for physical distancing, scheduling and contact tracing, low volume of personnel, and disinfection techniques. It may be very similar to the plan you are sending in order to receive research approval. If you have any more questions on this, you can send your SOP to be reviewed by the safety coordinators, which are Lucy Joseph and myself. Once the SOP is complete, the PI will train all personnel and document training to be kept in the lab's safety binder. Both PIs and researchers must receive all proper training in addition to ensuring that all other lab relevant training is up to date. Both parties must review and complete the face coverings guidance document, the public spaces SOP, and the lab-specific Work During COVID-19 SOP, in addition to viewing this webinar. All documents should be provided to the PIs by the department chairs. Prior to submitting a request for approval to the chair, the PIs must complete the PI checklist, which documents that all training and preparation for research during Phase 1X has been completed. Researchers, in addition to training, must complete a plan for working in the laboratory. Requirements listed in the approval process may be used to develop this plan. Researchers must also complete a self-assessment, which will be reviewed by the PI and the safety committee to evaluate if it is safe for the researcher to return to work. If not, the researcher will need to meet with their PI if they are comfortable or with the safety committee to discuss any special accommodations. If accommodations cannot be made, the researcher will be allowed to continue to work remotely. Employees must also fill out an employee checklist to ensure all requirements have been met. This will be approved of by the PI and should be kept on file in the lab safety binder. Once all requirements by all parties have been met, PIs will send their checklists to the department chairs and employees will send theirs to the PIs for approval. If you are required to work during this time, measures must be taken to ensure your safety and the safety of those around you. Strategic planning and communication with the PI, fellow coworkers, and those sharing the space, especially in shared lab spaces, is required. The following are guidelines to keep essential workers safe and healthy. Maintain lines of electronic communication. These can be used for important notifications such as notifying others of plans to be on a work site, if working alone, sending alerts upon safe arrival and departure from the laboratory, allow for trace of contacts in the workspace, and notifying others of inability to come to work. Resources such as emails, text, Slack, or other online messaging applications can be used. Essential employees must use an electronic calendar in order to reserve and coordinate times to be present in lab spaces and to reserve use of common equipment. When creating schedules, the following is advised. Work in non-overlapping shifts to keep the amount of people in a space to a minimum. Incorporate a blank time when no one is working to allow any viral particles to become inactivated between shifts. Limit the amount of personnel in a lab space and log locations accessed by each personnel daily to allow for contact tracing. Google Calendar is a common, easy-to-use resource for this purpose. Individuals are required to maintain a distance of at least 6 feet apart. Take into account each lab space, including shared open lab spaces. The amount of persons allowed in a lab at each time is dependent on the size of the lab space. Avoid working that involves 2 or more people being in close proximity of each other. In the addendum to guidelines for research ramp-up phase 1X, the university recommended that no more than 1 person can occupy a space of 250 square feet and no more than 1 person per day in small spaces. Labs in RMI buildings are comprised of multiple lab benches and are approximately 900 to 945 square feet. However, workers standing directly across from each other at a lab bench are not adequately distanced, as the lab benches are only approximately 5 feet wide. Also, if the work you are doing requires you to move around a lot, this limits the amount of people that can occupy that space. This schematic is an example of measurements of a lab in 3221 RMI South, which is about 900 square feet. We measured the lab benches and the space between the lab benches, as well as the spaces in the walkway. The equipment and layout of this space is unique to this lab, and each lab will be different. It is important to evaluate each space for what you will be doing in each situation. In addition, multiple labs may share common spaces, which will increase the amount of people in a given space. Due to this, the departments of Viticulture and Enology and Food Science and Technology are recommending 2 people per lab space at one time. Work can be done in non-overlapping shifts that do not necessarily need to be comprised of the same people. Again, scheduling, logging, and communication between labs and personnel is critical to effectively reduce risks of exposures. Lab support rooms are considered small spaces. These rooms are approximately 300 square feet and may contain equipment making the amount of usable space for distancing smaller. These rooms should be limited to 1 person only. This is an example of a space with multiple labs. The schematic from the previous 2 slides are from the Harris Lab section. So The section that says Harris Lab was the 900 square foot lab, and the part that says Harris Lab support room was the 300 square foot support room space. This first section is what is being called a lab space, but the fact that there are multiple labs in this space needs to be considered. Each lab will be limited to 2 or less people. Everyone working in this room is currently on a shared listserv and will eventually have a shared electronic calendar to sign up for times to be in each lab. This is so we can limit the number of people in the lab in order to safely maintain distancing with everyone actively in the space while accessing all of the areas in the lab that we need to. In this next section, we will discuss safe practices and hygiene to help reduce the spread of illnesses. The CDC has recommended the following guidelines in order to prevent the spread of illnesses such as COVID-19. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze with a tissue, throw the tissue away, and wash your hands. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Wear a face covering that covers your nose and mouth. Clean and disinfect high traffic areas such as doorknobs, light switches, and shared equipment. Stay home when you are sick. Practice frequent hand washing with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Perform daily self-monitoring for symptoms. Common symptoms of COVID-19 are fever, dry cough, and shortness of breath. However, other symptoms may be experienced. If you become sick with any symptoms, stay home and do not come into work. If you are experiencing symptoms similar to those of COVID-19, report to your healthcare provider as well as your PI or supervisor. Depending on the severity of your symptoms, you may need medical treatment and testing. If you qualify for testing and are confirmed positive, you must report to both the campus privacy office and either occupational health or student health. If a positive case in any building in the RMI complex is reported, all exposed areas will be locked down with keycard access suspended. Custodial services will be contacted to perform a deep clean and disinfection of the affected areas. All contacts with the positive individual will be identified and notified through the campus privacy office and health services. Disinfection of workspaces must be performed before commencing work, after work is completed, after use of shared equipment, furniture, or other shared items such as computers, shared laboratory equipment, door handles, elevator panels, microwaves, and eating areas. Disinfection should be performed at least once daily. A good way of ensuring this happens is to have a checklist of items in each lab and a sheet to document when and who performed this activity. Cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting are different. Cleaning physically removes dirt and impurities from surfaces. Germs are physically removed during this process, but not necessarily killed. Sanitizing reduces the amount of germs on surfaces to a safe level as determined by public health standards. Disinfecting inactivates or kills germs on surfaces. It is important to know the difference in order to help keep everyone safe. Some effective disinfectants against the virus responsible for COVID-19 are quaternary ammonium compounds, 70% ethanol, 70 to 75% isopropanol, and diluted bleach solutions. Other EPA-approved disinfectants are also available on the EPA website. We will now go into more detail on bleach solutions as the dilutions can be tricky. Commercial bleach comes in concentrations of 5 to 8% sodium hypochlorite. The concentration can be found on the label. Check the concentration in order to calculate the appropriate dilution. The CDC is recommending dilute solutions of 1,000 ppm or 0.12% of sodium hypochlorite. This is different for labs that are using bleach for inactivating liquid cultures. For inactivating liquid cultures, solutions of about 5,000 to 8,000 ppm sodium hypochlorite, which is equal to a final 10% concentration of bleach, is used. Bleach solutions need to be made fresh daily, as dilute bleach solutions degrade quickly. This is a good guide from Michigan State University on how to make an appropriate dilute solution from different concentrations of sodium hypochlorite and commercial liquid bleach. We will also be distributing an SOP on diluting bleach for disinfection purposes. Disinfectants are often hazardous chemicals, and care must be taken when in use. When working with a disinfectant, be sure to download and read the manufacturer-specific SDS for each chemical. Know the specific hazards for each chemical. Wear appropriate PPE, such as lab coats, safety glasses or goggles, and gloves. Follow the manufacturer instructions, which include proper use and effective contact time. Never mix chemicals. Many chemicals, such as bleach, can react with other types of chemicals, forming a more hazardous substance. Chemicals should not be mixed unless specified by the manufacturer. Since the beginning of March 2020, reports of cleaner and disinfectant-related poisonings have increased significantly. Bleach-related poisonings were the most common, with an increase of 62%, followed by non-alcohol-based disinfectants and hand sanitizer poisonings with increases of 36%. Inhalation exposures increased by 35% for cleaners and 109% for disinfectants. This is a reminder of the hazardous nature of cleaners and disinfectants and why it is important to abide by all safety precautions. All chemicals and waste must be properly labeled with the chemical name and the hazard. Chemicals must also be stored compatibly. Waste from hazardous chemicals must be disposed of in accordance with Safety Net 8. All hazardous waste must be removed within 9 months of accumulation start date. Pickup requests are completed using the UC Safety Waste site. See the waste fact sheet for instructions on how to complete a label. Should a spill of any chemical disinfectant occur, follow Safety Net 13. And in the event of an emergency, refer to the Campus Emergency Response Guide and the UC Davis Hall System Emergency Response Guide. We will now discuss new requirements for public spaces. Face coverings are now required in shared spaces such as hallways, stairwells, and common areas except for when eating and drinking. Private offices and other single-use spaces are exempt from this requirement. There is a document on face coverings from the departments that you will have to read if you have not done so already. This document details when, where, and what type of face coverings are required in different situations. Bathrooms are single occupancy only. When vacant, the bathroom doors are to be left open. When entering the bathroom, close the door behind you to let others know it is occupied. When finished, use a paper towel to touch the door handle and leave the bathroom door open to signal it is ready for the next person. And I just want to make a disclaimer. In our presentation on Tuesday, we said that bathrooms will be unisex. We had some backlash from that, so now bathrooms are still gendered, but continue to be single occupancy. Tables and eating areas are now single occupancy and must be disinfected before and after each use. Eating outside is advised. However, these tables will also be single occupancy. When you arrive in an eating area, you must be wearing your face covering. Face coverings can be removed right before you eat and must be replaced after you are finished. Elevators are also single occupancy. Face coverings are required while in the elevator, and it is advised to wash your hands with soap and water or use hand sanitizer before and after using the elevator. During this time, all conference rooms will be locked. Computer rooms will have limited access with a maximum of 2 to 3 people at a time, distanced appropriately. However, if any issues arise in this space, this will be reassessed. The mailroom is a small space and is now single occupancy. The door to the mailroom will most likely be left propped open so that others can see if the room is occupied before entering. If you see any room with the door closed, knock before entering to see if the room is occupied. While in a stairwell, maintain a distance of 6 feet and wear a face covering. If others cannot see you, alert them of your presence. If possible, try to only have one person in the stairwell and avoid passing. Thank you very much for attending. This concludes the performing essential or critical research during COVID-19 pandemic training. We will now be taking your questions. Again, please type your questions into the chat. So are there any questions? So I see one question. How long should be a blank time between shifts in the same space? I would say at least an hour. Do you provide disinfectant solution in the public area? So we are working to get spray bottles of 70% ethanol and paper towels in the public areas for people to use to disinfect surfaces. At what stage of ramp up will be allowed to have someone come on campus for lab equipment repairs? So we will start allowing people to come on campus to do equipment repairs. The only thing is you have to make sure that the person who comes is wearing a face covering, and make sure that there's limited amount of people in that space. So if somebody's coming to do a long repair that'll take more than an hour, only have one person in that space at a time, and make sure you maintain, or one other person in addition to the person who's fixing the equipment, and make sure you maintain your distance from the person who's fixing the equipment. Will these slides be distributed by email? We're going to post them up to the Safety Resources website. I could email them too if people think that is helpful. When is the shipment of face masks coming in? We're supposed to be receiving them on Monday. Hopefully we will. So we are hoping that the PIs will let us know how many face masks they need, and then we will get the face masks to them. Provide disinfectant in the restroom. In the restroom, I don't think so, because there's soap and water in the restroom. So probably not. Would there be any possible way to get access to the sterile entrance for labs that are by that area? So if you're meaning the area that's at the fire escape, we are not going to allow additional access to that, because we had issues with a robbery a couple of years ago. Somebody broke in through that back stairwell and broke into third floor labs and stole some things. So people will have to continue as they're doing right now and walking through the main labs. But when you're walking through those shared labs, you need to be wearing a face covering, as you might be coming into contact with people. Try to maintain your distance as much as is possible. Any other, are there hand sanitizer dispensers inside, outside restrooms, stairwells? So we're having a hard time acquiring hand sanitizer. So I think the most that we have access to right now is bottles of 70% ethanol and paper towels. At a later date, maybe hand sanitizer will be made available, but as of right now, I know we can't, we're having trouble getting a hold of it. I already have authorization from my supervisor to work during shelter in place. Do you need to wait for this new authorization, or can I continue my work on essential activities? So you can continue your work provided that you are currently receiving the training, you're following all the training and all the documentation, and that the documentation will be done in a short period of time. Once all the documentation is done and your PI has submitted their PI checklist to the PI, then you will be reviewed for approval. The students have access to student assistant office or department chair, just in case they need help. I am not sure about that. I think that depends on the people who are in the student assistant office or the department office. I would definitely send those people an email before going into their office. Anything that can be done virtually, please do, so that you have the limited amount of contact with people. What do we do with the outdoor masks when we go into a lab with biohazard protocols, meaning you're not allowed to bring things in and out of those labs due to pathogens? So that's a good question. So this is why we're getting disposable masks. So when you come into the building and you come into your lab, you will be wearing your quote unquote outdoor mask, or the mask you have that you wear around you currently. And then labs will be providing disposable masks, so you can change into that mask once you get into the lab and start your lab work. And once you're done with your lab work, you would dispose of that mask. And when you leave the lab, you would change back into the mask that you brought with you. Will researchers be required to note in a shared schedule whenever they need to pick up or drop off materials from a lab? Is there a central processor where I can view these shared schedules? So anytime you're going into the lab for whatever reason, yes, you will need to put it into the schedule because you will be in that space and you will be coming into contact with people. So each lab is required to make their own calendar. So whatever lab you're in, you will have your own calendar, and that will be, however your lab decides to do it, that will be the shared, where you can view those shared schedules. We won't have a whole one for the department just because that requires too much coordination. So if you're in a large space, like say, as I was saying about 3221, we have right now a shared listserv that everybody, so all 4 labs that are in that space are on, and eventually we will have a shared calendar that all 4 of those lab spaces will be on. So it's dependent per lab. Any other questions? Okay, I'll hang out for a little while longer just in case somebody thinks of a question that they forgot of. Oh, here we go. Will you be able to go to another lab to borrow something? So you're going to have to coordinate with that lab on times when you can come in. So you will have to email them and ask, hey, is there anybody working in the lab during this time? I need to use this piece of equipment. This is how long I'm going to be there in order to do that. Just because it requires, more people being in the space, and you don't know how many people are already in that space, and you still need to maintain all your distancing. So that will require coordination between you and the other lab in order to use that other piece of equipment. If you are doing non-hazardous work, do you have to change from your outside mask? No, you do not. You can, if you're doing computer work or something that doesn't, involve chemicals or pathogens, you can continue wearing your outside mask. About the fire escape stairs, shouldn't the student safety during the pandemic receive the concern for the robbery? If there's a good entranceway that maximizes the safety of all lab personnel, shouldn't it be blocked? So currently people aren't allowed to get through that back way anyway. There's no key to that fire escape access. It's once you are outside, you can't get back in from it. A robbery is student safety. You have to use common stairwells to get through the main part of the building anyway. So no, we are not opening those fire escape doors. You will have to be very careful when you enter the lab and be aware of your space and maintain distance from people. And again, you'll be wearing your face covering while you're doing it. So this applies to any public space where you might run into somebody. Is the rule of how to use disposable gloves the same as before? Yes. I don't understand what you mean by that rule. I mean, don't reuse disposable gloves. I would change your gloves every time that you're done using them. That's just a good rule of thumb, a good lab hygiene protocol. Any other questions? You're welcome. Thanks, guys, for listening. I hope I answered everybody's questions clearly and thoroughly. So the recording will be posted hopefully to the department BFTV website under safety resources, and I will send out an email when it has been posted. Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Again, I'll stick around for a couple more minutes to see if there are any more questions. Otherwise, thank you very much, and thank you for attending. Do you have any guidance on how performance of work not normally performed alone should proceed? For example, let's say you have to do an acid digestion but can't be with others in the same space as you would have occurred before COVID-19. So I would say to try and evaluate, so say you need somebody to be, does this protocol include somebody being in very close proximity with you or just somebody being present in the space? So if it, present in the space. Okay, so if somebody needs to be present in the space, they can be present in that space. They just need to be at least 6 feet away from you. So if you're on one lab bench and they're on the other side of the lab, that should be fine. However, if you're doing it alone, I would say, follow the SOP, talk to your PI before you do this, make sure that they agree that this is safe for you to do alone. If it's not safe for you to do alone, you can have that other person, across the lab from you. But if there just something happens where you need to do alone, make sure you take all the safety precautions. And if you don't feel safe doing this procedure, I would just recommend not doing it unless somebody else can be present at that time. I hope that answered appropriately. What about training of new students in the lab? That's a great question. When will the new students be starting? So, because that depends on, we can do virtual trainings, but yeah, in lab trainings, which is typically done in order before anybody to start lab work, will be difficult. Will this be for critical research? Or is this just research in general? Or for graduate students? What you could do, this time-sensitive research. Okay, so something that I've considered, just in case I needed to do this, was to take a recording of myself doing something in the lab and then sending it out. So that's a possibility. Or, you're in the lab and you have the student on a video call and you're taking them through the lab and explaining things as you do the training. That's an option too. Yeah, that's going to be really difficult with the new regulations and with everything that's going on. Worst comes to worst, what you could do is have you and the student, just one student at a time in the lab, and have yourselves both wearing masks, distance appropriately apart, and then go through the training. And then, you have them sign the training at a later date after things have any viral particles that might be around have kind of settled. Those are the major options that I can think of. How to use an analytical instrument? Ooh, that would be difficult. Is there a manufacturer guide for this instrument? I feel like that could be helpful. But if not, like I said, what you could do is take a video of how to properly use it and send it to them. I've done that with the autoclaves, because sometimes when I'm doing the autoclave training, the autoclaves will be in use and I can't actually show people how to use them. So when that started happening, I took a video of me properly using the autoclave and started distributing it to people who were taking the training. So that's a possibility. Or you can just take a whole bunch of pictures and do a PowerPoint slide. I would not advise using N95 masks. So N95s when you use an N95, you need to do a fit test. The fit test is required. The only time the fit test is not required is when there's a fire emergency. So if you're making everybody wear N95s, you're going to have everybody go through the fit testing and sign up for a respiratory protection program. So just to show somebody how to use an analytical instrument, I would say do not use N95s for this purpose. I hope that answers the question about the analytical instrument. No problem. Any other questions? Okay. I'll stay on for a couple more minutes. Okay. What will the maximum capacity be for shared labs like 2221? So as I was saying, each lab space, so the lab space be like one of those labs in 2221. So for that whole space, including 2260, would be about 8 people if you're abiding by the 2-person per lab guideline. So 2 people in the first lab, 2 people in the middle lab, 2 people in the end lab, and then 2 people in 2260. So 6 to 8 total, depending on how you look at it. Okay, any other questions? Do you know if the university will start recommending that we all work in similar shifts to limit contact numbers? I do not know if they will recommend that. I've had questions on that previously as well. Yeah, as of right now, they are not, but things might change. And as soon as things change, the department will update everybody on it. But if that's something you wanted to, design as part of your plan with your lab, you definitely could do that. If that makes you feel more comfortable. It makes sense to me, you were in the same contact with the same amount of people, so that way you're decreasing, in theory, your contact numbers. So that'll be as a per lab basis, a discussion that you have, with the lab and those in your shared space. But as of right now, it is not required. Any other questions? Will you be posting these questions? Yes, I will. I would take all these questions and write them into a document along with the questions that I got on Tuesday, and probably upload them to the same email or post, whatever I do with all the information regarding these presentations. Sorry for the additional stairway question, but will the stairway on the northwest corner of RMI North past the key card door be open or allowed to be used? Stairwell, northwest corner of RMI North. Is that the one with the metal mesh? It will allow it to be used. I do not think it'll be propped open. So we're still maintaining the same policy that we had with propped open doors, besides the mailroom. So while it may be allowed to be used, I don't think we're going to leave it propped open. Oh yes, yeah, it'll be open for people to use. Yes, we are not closing any stairwells. We're just not propping them open for anybody to come in. Okay, great. Any more questions? I'm more than happy to answer. Thank you everybody for listening and attending, and thank you for your good questions. I know things are very in flux right now and things are confusing and frustrating, so I appreciate everybody being so patient and cooperative with this process. Okay, any last questions? I'll hang around for a couple more minutes to see if anybody thinks of anything else. The SOP for COVID-19 management in labs says that we need to state how long disinfectant needs to be placed on the surface. Does the separate SOP on disinfectant procedures tell us that? Just trying to catch up here. So the separate SOP is for bleach alone. The other disinfectants contact time is listed on that COVID-19 SOP. So you could just, mention that in your detailed protocol. The new SOP, yeah, is only for bleach, and that's mainly because I got a question about bleach on Tuesday. Previously, I was recommending 10% solutions because that's what most, biolabs that have some kind of biological cultures use and they have on hand. But we went back and we're abiding by the CDC guidelines, which is a 1,000 ppm solution or 0.12% of sodium hypochlorite. So that's why this new SOP is being created and distributed. But the ones that were in the previous SOP still have the appropriate contact times for each disinfectant. And also it's on if you're going to use another one, you can just say, we're going to use this disinfectant. This is the contact time. We will allow it to sit for the contact time. Okay, any more questions? Okay, I'll hang on for a couple more minutes just in case another one pops up. But thank you again and stay safe, everyone. Okay, if that was the last question, then I'll go ahead and end the meeting. Any last questions? Oh, okay, I will wait. A colleague in another department was considering using the UV light on the PCR clean hood to deal with disinfect electronics using the UV light. Thoughts? This is a little outside the box, but sometimes it's hard to disinfect sensitive surfaces. Okay, so my thoughts on this is sometimes UV light can degrade things like plastics, and also UV light degrades pretty quickly. So while UV light is effective in disinfecting this virus, there's a lot of precaution that comes with using UV light. You also have to, wear a UV face shield whenever you're using it to protect yourself from the UV light. And you have to make sure your lamp has been changed. I think it's at least yearly or whatever the lifespan is. And I know a lot of labs forget to do that when they use that for UV light for disinfecting. So I would advise against UV light for disinfecting. But if you went through all the precautions needed to do that, you could go ahead. I would just, it seems like it's more hassle than it's worth, in my opinion. Yeah, it's a good question. They've been recommending UV light, people going outside to help disinfect the virus. It's a great question. UV light can be used for many applications. It's just one of those things that's a little bit tricky to use appropriately. No problem. Happy to answer any other questions if anybody has them. I'll hang on in case there's a last minute burning question. But if not, then I will end the chat in another minute or two. Okay, then if that's it for questions, I'll go ahead and end the meeting. Again, thank you everybody so much, and thank you for being patient while we're working on this. It's a crazy time for all of us, so please continue to be patient. We appreciate it so much. Stay safe, everyone, and have a good day. I will now end the meeting.